This is a Renegade Media Network podcast.
Obviously, you guys know I prefer organizations that flow counter to the mainstream narrative, and I've got the perfect one to tell you about. That would be Texas Scorecard. They were founded back in 2015 by a former Ron Paul congressional press secretary. They are Texas-based, Texas-focused counter-culture media organization. How cool is this? They've got podcasts, videos, live programming, a really nice print edition. They've got guest commentaries, very popular daily email newsletter that will highlight the biggest stories of the day. You can actually trust these guys without the mainstream leftist spin put on much of the news we unfortunately see these days. Their mission: disrupt statism and reconstitute self-governance. They do not want a seat at the table. They want to get rid of the table. They are pro-citizen. They will be your one-stop shop for Texas politics and news. That is for damn sure. I actually mean that because lately I wanted to know some of the stuff that was going on here. I DM'd Texas Scorecard to find out what was going on. They serve those who are tired of being lied to by the mainstream media. That would be you. That would be me as well. They do not align with any party. They work hard to hold lawmakers on both sides of the aisle accountable. Their reporting was directly responsible for taking down the corrupt Republican Speaker of the House, Dennis Bonnen. And check this out, the coolest part of this: nonprofit, no paywalls. All of the reporting is always free. You can find them on any social media channel by searching Texas Scorecard, facebook.com/Texas Scorecard, Twitter @Texas Scorecard, and then they're on YouTube as well, youtube.com/Texas Scorecard. You can find their free daily newsletter. Sign up for it over at texasminute.com. Go check out Texas Scorecard. You will not be disappointed.
You are now listening to the Counterflow Podcast, a place for dissonant voices and unapproved opinions.
You get split in fucking half, but I call the hologram graph. But I am the center inside the placenta of math. You clash with cyanide gas and die fast. Rhythmical equivalent of solids, liquid, and gas. We smash your sinus with the power of Lord Titus. But I am the virus inside of the iris of Cyrus.
Here is your host and humble narrator, Buck Johnson.
What's up, you guys? Welcome back once again to the Counterflow Podcast. I am so glad to be back here in Lockhart, Texas, but what an incredible weekend I had in Las Vegas. You might notice my voice sounds just a touch off. That's because it was almost gone for a day or two. Myself and two of my close friends were in Las Vegas for the Raiders Monday Night Football home opener. And when I come back from these games, my voice takes a few days to get back to normal. I'm not sick, don't worry. I've still got those antibodies kicking strong, fighting off any Delta forces coming my way. Enough of that. On to today's show, where I have two friends together here on the show, Matt Erickson and Steven Messina. They are the hosts of the Kingpilled Podcast. And I say podcast because it's finally going to be that. They've been doing it on YouTube only I say only, it's actually on their Facebook page too, but primarily YouTube for months and months and months now. And Matt Erickson's been saying, I promise to get my shit together and make this into podcast format. Well, they're finally doing that. So I'm having them on as kind of a celebration of that. And they're always fun to talk to privately. And Matt's been on the show many times, and sometimes he ruffles some feathers. And a lot of you guys, though, the first time I had Matt on, it might have been more reactions sent my way than any guest I've had on. Most of them quite positive. It was really neat to see. Some negative. And I think Matt doesn't mind that one bit. In fact, we talk about how he almost has like a filtering mechanism for his audience. And I will say this, I am a part of his audience when they do these video casts, and finally doing these in podcast format. His fans are quite loyal, and some of them are also fans of this show, and I'm glad to have them. I guess, I was going to tell you a bunch of stuff up front here. Let's just get to these guys from the Kingpilled Videocast and now the Kingpilled Podcast. Please welcome back Matt Erickson, and for the first time, Steven Messina is on the show. Matt, Steven, welcome, guys.
Hello. What's up? Thanks for having us, man.
Yeah, I have been waiting, and you have been teasing making Kingpilled an actual podcast for months and months and months. And now, so Matt, what's the status? Am I going to see it if I try to subscribe here in my iTunes podcast feed?
You won't quite see it yet. I'm waiting to hear back right now from Apple. I've got a couple episodes uploaded and I need to get it all approved and all that by the different platforms. So it should be, I would imagine it should be out and available for people to start downloading within the next week or so.
Okay, this should drop. Let me look at my calendar.
I've been fighting it tooth and nail because I'm really content to just be on YouTube. I think that YouTube is the future of free speech. I think Matt is just way on the wrong end of this whole podcast thing.
He didn't want us to start the supporting listeners group either and start taking money for ourselves because he just feels so passionately about us fundraising for YouTube, encouraging people to get YouTube Premium so that they can watch us on YouTube with their phone closed.
Yeah.
Yes.
We're actually agents for YouTube, as it turns out.
You guys can monetize now on YouTube. You hit the threshold of audience members, I suppose. It seems, I'll say this, YouTube is not my favorite way to, I hate this term, consume content, but I do enjoy watching y'all on there, and it seems like your fan base is pretty loyal. Have you guys noticed that?
Yeah, definitely.
I'll say this about you guys. The people that don't like you, and the people that do seem to really like you, and it's not a lot of like, it's okay. There's not a lot of that going on. Steve, also, I guess I'd be remiss in not getting intros on here. And to my audience listening, my voice is slightly messed up. I said on the last episode that I was going to attend the Raider game. I did do that, and once the day or two after, I do that every time. I sound like this for, like I said, a few days. So my apologies. As Steven likes to say, my voice is dancing. Well, it's not today. It's fallen flat. So, Steven, you've never been on here before.
No.
Tell my audience what you would like them to know about you briefly. We don't have to get into a long, in-depth bio.
Yeah, as little as possible.
That's fair. That's fair.
I started bothering Matthew to do a podcast because I thought it would be very important that people listen to him talk. And regrettably, I didn't have any intention of like being a part of it. I was just kind of harassing him as I do people on the internet. And it's like, man, you got to start a podcast. And I did not know that my face was going to be involved with it in any way possible. But basically, I think I found myself, like a lot of people found themselves, looking for answers at some point during, I would say, COVID-ish, and then into the election, and then after the election, certainly, and we just kind of started babbling. And
you mean the Joe Jorgensen election?
What's that?
Do you mean the Joe Jorgensen election?
Yes, the Joe Jorgensen election. That's correct. And as far as the people that don't like us, I believe the term for it is called Twitter.
YouTube loves us. Twitter hates us.
Right. That's correct.
And I'll get to you in just a sec, Matt. Steven, you were, I believe, involved with the Libertarian Party Mises Caucus at some point, or in the groups or something like that.
I was in the. Sorry, this is pretty hard to keep a straight face for this, man. I had been just totally like after 9/11, I had just taken such a hiatus. I came to the conclusion that I'm never going to know what's going on. I'm not going to know the truth about it. As much as I love the idea of pursuing the truth, it seems I'm never going to have any idea of what it is. I would have to outsource all this to somebody that I trust, and I'm just going to kind of live my life. And listening to Legion of Skanks, hearing Dave Smith say the word libertarian again, sometime in the 2010s or whatever, got me to maybe listen to Part of the Problem and okay, yeah, this was kind of fun, these political ideas and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden, I find myself back in this place where it's like, man, maybe the best thing is not to get involved in all this, not to concern myself with, anything happening politically, and just kind of step back. I don't remember the question that you asked me.
Well, that's
involvement Mises. Okay, yeah. Sorry. So he got me like really jazzed up about this Mises caucus, back in whenever it was started. And it was like, yeah, man, we're going to take over. We're going to do the whole thing. And, Mises, I like that. I like that word. So, there's a Facebook group. Cool. I'm going to get in there. And it just turned out not to be anything at all in the way of how I thought it was, what I thought it was going to be. And I went through kind of like a little history just today with some friends about getting muted and banned, ultimately kicked out, for saying ideas that I guess were perceived as like, right wing, which at the time, was viewed as like a dirty word. And it was just, my experience was just like, oh, this isn't what I thought it was going to be at all. This is maybe the opposite of what I thought it was going to be.
And Matt, I guess you've got, for those who don't know, tell them what you do, and then we'll get into some of your political past as well.
So right now I'm the co-host of Wealth, Power, and Influence with Jason Stapleton. I've been there for about 3 years now, formerly the Jason Stapleton program. And so I do that podcast. We do Kingpilled as well, like you said, the show with Steven and I. And then I work with Jason Stapleton, the other host of Wealth, Power, and Influence. I work with him in his business building. We just created a social media platform, a community called the Nomad Network, that's for liberty-minded entrepreneurs who are more interested in creating their liberty than in talking about it or asking someone else for it. So we just released that. You can find it, the Nomad Network, on the app stores. But so that's the basically what I spend all my time with, is the 2 podcasts and working with the business and connecting Jason to different interviews and then getting people into his network and helping people access their content. Jason does just a tremendous amount of consulting and coaching and training for people who are trying to either create a digital product that they can use to sell or to scale a digital business. So even if you have like an existing business and you're trying to add a digital element to it or whatever, that's the type of thing that we're doing. So I'm spending a tremendous amount of time connecting with people personally, listening to their hopes and dreams and listening to them talk about the vision that they have and trying to bring that vision into reality. And these are the people that I see that are really making a big difference. They're the ones who are, they're not really bogged down in all of the political mumbo jumbo. They're just focused on developing increase for themselves, building and creating and bringing things to market, bringing things into the world and providing value for other people. And in return, they're making a really good living for themselves and being able to make themselves independent of the existing political financial system. They're putting themselves in a position where if they need to, they can transcend into a new system. They can leave the country. They can relocate to a different state. They can, get involved in it. They can, like, maybe if their product is failing in one arena, they can port it over to another one, and it gives them the flexibility and the freedom to adapt and do that sort of thing. So it's a very, very rewarding way to spend our days. And it was all of this kind of seeing all of this together. I was very involved with the Mises Caucus early on, and I haven't said a lot about how closely involved I was, just because, given the nature of the way that I parted ways with them, I'm not necessarily trying to be a troll or trying to I don't think they would take me very seriously, so I just don't use it as a point of pride or whatever. I'm not advertising how closely involved with it I was, but I was very close with it. And as I was watching what we were trying to create and realizing, well, this is going to involve, having to like door knocking and going to conventions and doing all of this political bullshit, just the stuff that it's like, all of this, it feels like the world's kind of falling apart around us. And the answer to this is going to go knock on some doors and tell people that they should vote Libertarian. I'm like, well, why am I trying to pull people into politics? Isn't the whole thing trying to get people out of politics? Like trying to focus on the market and all that kind of thing. And that kind of led me down a train of thought that I started really questioning libertarianism as a practical ideology, as something that could ever be politically successful. And I realized that the nature of the message is that it's not meant for a political audience. It's explicitly anti-political. And if you try to shoehorn it into a political sphere, of the political arena, it actually has a whole bunch of negative externalities. There's a bunch of negative consequences that come from trying to make a non-political message political.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, how do I need to go deeper? I need to understand this better. And that's what led us on the journey of Kingpilled, and I guess that's what got us to where we are today.
I was just saying something the other day, and this, what you were just hit upon, kind of reminds me of it. And maybe I haven't even hashed this out a lot, but I was talking to someone and I said, you're not going to have, even at a small level, you're not going to have a libertarian government. You're just not going to. You're going to have to live your life as closely as you can to how it makes you happy. And if that's a libertarian life per se, then fine, but you're going to have to do it somewhere that's as close as you can get to that, but it won't be that. So obviously it's probably not in San Francisco because that's too restrictive for a lot of people, but there might be small town somewhere where you can pursue what you want in life and able to make money, like Jason's helping coach people to do. But trying to form a libertarian government is not going to happen. And that sounds, people have said that that's pessimistic or something. I think it's almost more of a white pill, knowing that, look, here's the reality. Work within it when you can. If you have to work outside of it, then try to do that as well. But this is just the reality of the situation as it is. And that's just, you can't change that because you have abstract ideas in your head.
What's kind of interesting is that I don't think that you would run into any libertarian who, said anything other than the idea that they would be obsessed with the truth, and I just had this conversation today, and everyone, when people use the term like black pill, I was like, well, is it the truth? Because if it's the truth, then it's not a black pill. It's helping you kind of deal with reality. And in a lot of what like his argument with me was, you're not giving me solutions. And I was presenting solutions, but the issue was the solutions weren't within the range of the outcomes that he was looking for, and I find this with a lot of libertarians, well, a lot of people in general, I guess. I don't know if it's because we, for the most part, grew up in a time where we had this kind of feeling like everything was always going to be okay. And maybe even our parents had it, okay, there was a Cuban Missile Crisis, but everything kind of turned out, even though you see this decline in society, at the end of the day, you always had something to eat and, and whatever else. And people kind of grew up with that. And it's like ingrained. It makes you forget that bad things can happen, and bad things certainly have happened the world over. So if someone like Jason is telling you, hey man, you gotta get your stuff together. You gotta be ready to move from this place or that place, and because, some bad stuff, if Ben Armani is telling you to build the ark, any number of those kind of prescriptions, those are just outside of, well, this is how we stop tyranny, and that's not what people are exactly looking for. People have this idea, I don't know if it's based on school or like the American Revolution or just this idea of democracy, that you can do something to affect change. There always needs to be something that's prescriptive, that involves the individual getting out there and bringing about the world that, someone who has no position of power, you're just going to make what you want happen somehow. You will never have to have a choice of like two bad things, or like a bad thing and a less bad thing. And that's a lot of life. I don't know how much, I don't know how you make it to 25 without realizing that that's like the reality, but that's the reality of a good portion of life. And I was trying to tell my friend, it's just like, man, if you're like a marathon runner and you want to like increase your VO2 max and you want to get your times down, but man, your times just kind of keep going up, and you go to the doctor and you're just like, hey man, I don't know what I got going on, something respiratory, do I need an antibiotic? Do I need like an inhaler? Do I have asthma? That would really suck. I'm a marathon runner. I've got a big race coming up. And he tells you that you have lung cancer. Like that might suck, but if it's true, it's important. right?
Yes.
In like your prescription for moving forward might be like, hey, there's good, it, doesn't look like it's metastasized, so we're going to do some surgery, and then you've got recovery, and then blah, blah, blah. And then, like maybe a year or so, you get back to kind of like, running marathons again, and hey, you'll be able to coach your kid running marathons. And the guy's like, no, you don't understand. I'm not trying to hear that. I have a race this weekend and I need to get my times down. It's just like, look, man, you got to adjust your paradigm. I don't know what about living through, 2020 hasn't told people that they need to adjust the way that they think. But I think it's obvious. It's becoming more obvious, to be fair to a lot of people, that they do.
I really like that analogy. The analogy that reality is reality, whether you like it or not. And if you're going to, if you have lofty goals, especially because I think libertarians tend to, this is what I realized: libertarianism isn't far enough outside the box. That's kind of the point I got to. I felt like when I got to the point of ANCAP, I felt like I'd hit the basement, I hit the foundation level, but then it's kind of like I was pushing on the floor, and I realized there's some flex to it, and there's actually something underneath it. I peeled up the floorboards and realized that there's an entire world underneath those floorboards that I hadn't even considered was there. That's the libertarianism is at the furthest fringe of acceptable opinion. It's at the furthest fringe of the acceptable range of ideologies, and ultimately libertarians share a worldview with the people they claim to be opposed to. They share the same fundamental principles and the same fundamental values. Ultimately, libertarianism is like it's liberalism taken to its fullest extent. But America is liberal, and increasingly, because the rest of the world are all vassal states of the United States, the world is liberal. We live in a liberal world, using liberal in the technical sense, not liberal in the Obama sense necessarily. So once I realized that, I was like, okay, I need to get even further outside the box. I need to think even further. I need to expand my range of what I would consider to be acceptable even more. Ultimately, I just want to know what is. I don't want to start with my conclusion and then just go look for evidence to support my conclusion. I want to look at the evidence and let the evidence take me to the conclusion, and then accept the conclusion for whatever it is. So like with your analogy, the conclusion is you have lung cancer. You could say that, well, I'm not a person who gets lung cancer, or I don't want to have lung cancer, or, it messes up my race and I've got to go run this race. You can't change reality. Reality is coded in the way that it's coded. You can change the nature of reality, but you have to start with actual reality to begin with. You have to begin with the truth, and then you can work from there. So libertarianism is it's within the frame of, it's like they've identified an optimal conclusion or an ideal conclusion. Like, we'd all love to live in a libertarian world. That'd be fantastic. So how do we get to it? Well, you don't get to it by acting like a libertarian. And ultimately, we have a chat that we're in. We were talking with Tho Bishop this morning, and he was having a conversation with one of these internet libertarians. We're not even going to say his name, but one thing that their conversation brought to mind to me is that really, like, the fundamental dividing line here, I think, between this, like, the school of thought that the three of us and our group of people that we're headed toward, and the rest of even the most radical ANCAPs, the thing that really divides us is the distinction between, do you want to do something about solving the problems of tyranny, or do you just want to create more libertarians? Because those aren't the same thing. If your goal is, we want to convert people to libertarianism, that might ultimately, eventually, in the long run, maybe will have some effect on spreading liberty, advancing liberty, whatever, or pushing back the state, or whatever you want to call it. But if you look at the real, tangible, actual effects of people doing that right now, over the last decade, of people having this big libertarian awakening, lots and lots of people have all come on board. They've all been brought into this message, and they all fully believe it, and they're all talking about it constantly, injecting so much energy into these ideas. And the effect has been not only have they not rolled back the state at all, the state has massively expanded and gotten way more tyrannical. And people will say, well, you can't blame that on the libertarians. I'm not blaming it on the libertarians. I'm saying the libertarians had nothing to do with it. They didn't change it at all.
And there's actually some argument that, when you see this current regime specifically, and you look at Biden, you could make an argument that in the future, they are going to be the fuel that keeps this thing going. And even if you kind of take it back to, and just to explain that, like, obviously I'm talking about basically being, the poster children for domestic terrorists. We were saying before the show, there's a lot of like young guy energy that's in there. And young guy energy, if you've ever been a young guy or like seen a young guy, heard a story about a young guy, it's pretty dumb. It doesn't know what to do. And it's like, no one can really escape that. It just is like, everyone's been there. If you're past that, you can kind of look back and just kind of see that if you were a young guy before, you were probably an idiot. And so a lot of the young guy energy, that feeds off of this, we can definitely do something about the state of this world. I, as an individual, can do something about this. Bill of Rights, the American Revolution, this kind of like LARPy American Revolution energy goes into like talking about 3D printed guns, posting pictures of said guns on the internet, saying a lot of inflammatory stuff that I don't know how bad like this whole surveillance thing, war on domestic terrorism thing is going to get. I can see it getting kind of bad though. Like, even if it gets half as bad as I think it might get, it's still pretty bad. And so that's the war on these people is what keeps the regime going. And like, even when Matthew's talking about them identifying like the ideal society and how like they have no idea to bring it about, ironically enough, the best chance for that society to emerge is after this all collapses. And indeed, like it's probably collapsing, but that doesn't mean it's going to collapse tomorrow. So the best course of action for these people, who, by the way, usually claim to be low time preference people, right, is to put in work so that when the opportunity arises, they are in a position where they can help shape the next society. But it's not going to happen like this election cycle. You're not even gonna. I know there's probably like an argument that you're gonna prevent, some degree of tyranny somehow. You're gonna like deflect the tyranny or make the tyranny look a little bit different. It just, you're really not going to do. Even it goes back to like Harry Brown's book, How to Live Free in an Unfree World. He was saying like the same. These outcomes, they're going to happen. You need to kind of step away from it. And this is like in what the book's written in the 70s. And when he re-released it in the 90s, he's like, yeah, man, same deal. I'm reissuing this book, but nothing changed. Everything I'm saying in the book, stands true today. And it's even more true. It's more true today. So, if you're in love with Ancapistan and you're a libertarian, you're a young guy and you've got like all this energy, and, I would just suggest that, that you don't put it into like shit posting. Like my friend made fun of me today. He's like, "Oh, what's your platform? Stop shit posting and go learn how to weld." It's like, yeah.
That actually would be quite helpful. That's actually
like a really good, that could be a hashtag. But yeah. And so it's just like if you are like a low time preference person, right? And you can do things to improve your human capital, like Jason Stapleton said. Like, man, go do that and prepare yourself and be ready. Like, we don't know if Ancapistan is going to happen, but if it's going to happen, it's not going to happen right now. It's going to happen maybe not 20 years from now. But you or your children, like, you got to be ready. If you're someone who is a high time preference person and just kind of in denial about it, LARPing the American Revolution online is also not going to bring around Ancapistan. You should also go do what Jason Stapleton says, probably. And I'm not affiliated with Jason. I just kind of like what he has to say. For political action and stuff like that, getting involved at like a smaller level. I think looking at someone like Tho Bishop, in the work that he's doing. You guys just had a great conversation. But man, of all the things that are going to bring around Ancapistan, a lot of the way that libertarians behave, especially online, is not it.
Yeah, and while you're in your 20s and thinking about these ideas, doing something like Jason Stapleton preaches, start building up your wealth, your influence, and at some point, if there is an option to where maybe I can get into politics and it does look doable in 15 years from now. Well, you're someone respected in your community. You've got wealth, you've got power, you have some influence. That would be the time then to be able to convince people who have the power to make things happen, make that happen. And when you're in your 20s and you're on Twitter, I would say if someone asked you, what's your platform? Go to learn welding and quit shit posting. Yeah, that's one good idea. I mean, some cousins of mine, there's 3 of them and 2 went to college, one to play baseball, who probably won't make it, one to learn art, and her favorite class was, quote, gender studies. She's now bagging groceries. The other one that chose not to go to college is going for his master plumber. And guess who's the happiest of those 3? So, Why did Zipix Toothpicks choose this podcast to start with before any of the other ones in their advertising? Well, it's because I reached out to them because I love this product. I was already using them, so why not help sell them and in turn make a little money for the Counterflow podcast? Zipix nicotine toothpicks. Let me tell you about them. Remember the toothpicks you would have when you were young with the cinnamon flavor? These are basically the adult version of that. They've got nicotine in each toothpick, and like I just mentioned, they actually have that cinnamon flavor, along with mocha flavor. Peppermint watermelon is very good, and I really love the Spice Island clove flavor. And so if you're trying to kick the nasty habit you may have, or the stupid-looking vape habit that you may have, this is the best and cheapest alternative. Not only cheapest, but think of it this way. When you need that nicotine fix and you're on an airplane because everyone's flying again now, right? Or you're at a restaurant because now restaurants are open again. You don't have to wait until you get to your destination if you're on vacation. You don't have to get up rudely and leave the table if you're at a dinner. They're toothpicks. You can have them anywhere. No one cares. And like I said, if it's after dinner, you can actually use the toothpick function of it as well. So go to zipixtoothpicks.com and enter promo code Counterflow for 20% off. Once again, zipixtoothpicks.com, promo code Counterflow. Let's get back to the show.
1,000%.
Matt, Steven was kind of getting into one of the ideas that our friend Andrew from Popular Liberty puts forth, and he has kind of his own unique spin on it. I want to get into that. He calls it archetropism. I forget which rule it is from archetropism, but the fact that feeding the beast with your protests and whatnot makes it stronger. I think an extreme example of that, and I've been in and around the conspiracy world for decades now, conspiracy people started thinking Timothy McVeigh was on the side of the government because what he went and did made the government that much more powerful. That's an extreme example, but I think it's the same kind of thing that we're talking about.
Yeah, it's the same principle that the state doesn't have this. The state doesn't just expand itself willy-nilly. It has a specific formula that it uses, and I guess it's not a specific formula, but it's a general formula that then can be applied in specific ways. And the biggest way that I've observed, especially, is that the principle of archetropism is basically that the state will generate chaos so that it gives itself an opportunity to come in and provide order, and that order is ultimately power. So the state is creating opportunities for it to exercise its own power. When you begin to act in opposition to the state, you are actually volunteering to participate in that process with the state. You're actually creating the pretext for the state to step in and reassert itself. The way that a democratic state ultimately functions is it functions by converting the energy of its opposition into power. It's like an alchemical conversion machine that converts energy into power. It's funny you mentioned Popular Liberty because I was just looking at this tweet that P. Quinones pointed this out the other day. He said he thinks about this tweet almost every day. Andrew said, libertarians treat power as a morality problem the same way lefties treat economics as a morality problem. It just shows that each group doesn't know what they're talking about. Both are engineering problems. Political power is inevitable. There's going to be institutions that wield political power. If your desire is to abolish that political power, what you're saying is that you want to take the political power yourself to abolish the political power that other people have. You should recognize the fundamental contradiction in saying that. Now, that's not unusual. It's not unusual for people to say, hey, I want to have the political power for myself and prevent other people from having it. It's just that libertarians aren't self-aware enough to realize that that's what they're saying. They're just another in a whole group of people who want to take political power for themselves. And ultimately, freedom is political power. When you talk about having freedom, what you're saying is, I want to have political power for myself over my own life. The problem is that that's not something that you are owed. You aren't. People are not obligated to give you political power. This was something that Mitch's Moldbug said that just really, it was one of those insights. He said that the reason he's not a libertarian is because he does not believe that political power is a human right. And that was a mind expander for me when I realized that that's the libertarian position, that political power is a universal human right, that every single person should have equal political power. It gets at the fundamental liberal baseline of libertarianism, that ultimately it's about some form of equality, and there needs to be this equalizing principle where everybody is brought to the same level playing field. Once you recognize that, once you recognize this urge to universalize all of your principles, this is another liberal thing that we need to take over. They'll say, we want to take over the world and leave you alone. But people don't want to be left alone. This is why when you're trying to sell a product to somebody, if they're not buying what you're selling, you have to look at why. The answer isn't, oh, well, we just need to do what we've been doing, but do it harder. We need to say the exact same thing, but louder. We need to say the exact same thing in front of more people. Well, why is it that people aren't latching onto it? If these ideas are so good, if the world that you're describing is so desirable, if it would be so good for people, why are they not clamoring for it? Why aren't they coming to you begging for this? It's because ultimately they don't want liberty, or at least not according to the definition. The libertarian definition of liberty is really that every single person takes responsibility for their own lives.
I totally agree.
People don't want to take responsibility for their own lives. We
should so do a show together. I'm agreeing with everything that you're saying. But yeah, it's like it's that self-aware thing you're tapping. So we kind of critique libertarians or just the vocal libertarians maybe because we want more, we want better,
yes.
and we see like a lot of like potential there. So if people are listening to this and it's like, oh God, these people are just like pointing out the hypocrisy of the people who just sit around and point out the hypocrisy. This is like way too meta. It's for a purpose.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was thinking about that also today, when libertarians have this idea of, anytime election time comes around, they talk about, man, this is just two groups of people battling to tell the other one how to live. And man, there's something really important there where it's just like, you kind of, as a libertarian, think you're exalted above this. It's just like, you're right. You're another group of people that thinks that the best way for other people. And you do want to tell those people how to live ultimately. It's going to be a free market, all these like regulations and everything are going to go away. You have to understand that like when people are hearing that, if they are steeped in leftism or whatever, you're talking to like an AOC fan.
Yes.
They think that, they want people to be, freedom is this weird word that has a very subjective definition, depending on who's talking. So it's just like freedom for someone who's like, rabid AOC supporter, like they think that like all these government protections for underrepresented minorities and blah, 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 just for an example, like that is allowing this person to be free. If you take those away, you are enslaving this person. So it's just, you have to be, again, like you said, self-aware enough to see how you're perceived by other people. And no one else really thinks that you are trying to take over and then leave everybody alone.
Right.
If you take over, the last thing people want is people to take over and leave them alone. They're like, if you're going to take over, at least give me some shit. At least do something for me. Yes. The definition of tyranny is someone who takes over and leaves them alone.
Yes.
Now someone else has all the political power and I don't even get anything out of it.
Yes.
You're just selling something that people don't want.
And in their mind, typically it's rich white men. Now the patriarchy, if libertarians get their way, the patriarchy rules everything. Minorities are thrown out on the streets. Old people don't have Social Security. All of the stuff, I've heard it for years and years and years. That's a very, very common perspective, unfortunately. But
and here's the thing. those people who sense that, they're correct. Because the way that libertarianism functions in the real world is it becomes an empty suit for the people with the most ill intent. If your goal is, we're just going to step in and we're going to eliminate all of this stuff and everyone's just going to go back to their own lives. What's going to happen automatically is people are the people who are the most Machiavellian and the most power hungry and the most corrupt are naturally going to take advantage of whatever system exists to put themselves in a position of power. So to them, actually, this libertarian desire to break everything down, abolish all these power hierarchies it's like a dream come true. This is the perfect Trojan horse for us. The libertarian message ultimately becomes a Trojan horse for tyranny. And because now we can use this, break down everything. Monica Perez said on an episode recently, she said, when you're advocating the abolition of the state, the result of that isn't going to be anarcho-capitalism. The result of that's going to be global government, and that's what we're seeing now.
That's a tough pill to swallow in terms of everyone's favorite system of capitalism, is that when it's taken over by sociopaths and the worst people ever, it's like any system is going to suck, and then if for how I think we kind of see things going, in the coming decade or so, under the banner of free market capitalism, I think there's going to be some real terrible shit that happens. And you're going to hear a lot of people say, yeah, but it wasn't real free market capitalism. And then who do you start to sound like? And then you realize the problem might not be the system. The problem might be, we're getting into like nature of man and, the lack of, underpinning of morality. There's nothing that underpins that system. And then that gets into sort of the other side of the conversation, that we started to sort of delve into in the podcast when we started kind of looking at religious practices and, at least, some exploring, some biblical texts and stuff like that. But that's often a part of the conversation that is that's left out.
I'd be remiss, especially since Steven's on here, if I didn't get into a little bit of a discussion about a man that many people know as Mencius Moldbug. Some people know him as Curtis Yarvin. Steven just calls him Kurt.
I mean, that's what I do with friends. Bob.
That's right. Yeah. Can you talk about the luncheon at all? Are you okay with doing it? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to put the ISO up here on my camera. I'm very sorry. This is like total like amateur stuff.
Oh my God, it looks good though. Look at now. It looks good.
Yeah. Almost. A little blown out now. Yeah. Sorry about that. What an embarrassment.
The most expensive camera here, and he's got to adjust it.
Yeah, I know. That's what I get for using like natural lighting. I'm an idiot.
This is the magic of the pre-record. Is all this can be edited out.
Oh, okay. Yes. Thank Christ. So I did have I had lunch with Kurt. Sorry, you guys probably Curtis Yarvin or Mencius Moldbug or however you guys call him. But yeah, it was awesome. I subscribe and of anything that the name of our podcast means, I think that there's definitely an homage to Mr. Yarvin for being one of the people who got us like thinking differently. Maybe primarily the person who got us thinking differently. So I subscribed to his Substack, and he put out that he was going to be meeting some people, and you can set up a 30-minute appointment. If you want to have lunch or blah, 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 you can email him. And I emailed him and somehow made myself sound interesting enough that he agreed, or maybe he just agrees to people who aren't even interesting. But yeah, we had lunch. It was like 2 or 2.5 hours or something like that. And it was just, it was just awesome. I kind of wanted to see if I could like bro it up with him a little bit. Like, I just wanted to see like how much of a bro he was. Yeah, we like kind of broed it up a little bit. It was really cool. Like we talked a lot about like political ideas and philosophy and stuff like that. But like there was some bro time. Like he's a dude. He's a dude. Like that was like I really just wanted to see like if he was a dude, and he indeed is.
Was it just two of you? You two?
Yeah, it was me, him, and his daughter. It was so sick.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was in like a very small like Italian restaurant with low ceilings. And man, my man was at full volume saying anything he wanted to.
That's the best part. Were you kind of doing the thing where, and this is in my nature just because I'm not a super loud person, but like you're looking around like, oh my God, there's normies over here hearing what this dude's saying. And it's
I mean, it was like right in like DC, you know, and I know he feels like at home. I guess if, you know, it stands to reason, you know, sort of his backstory or whatever, that he would feel at home there, but like, I don't feel at home there. And I don't know about the clientele, man. You know, I'm not sure. I'm not sure how many like neo-cameralists there are, you know.
Right. What was on the what'd you guys eat?
Oh, so much food. Yeah, and like really expensive mozzarella and a bottle of wine. And we all had like bolognese pasta. The three of us. And man, it doesn't sound like a lot now, but man, it sure worked out to be about $250.
Who paid?
Well, I mean, a gentleman never tells, so.
Wow. Okay. Just for those listening, and it will be a portion of the audience that, if they're not familiar with Curtis Yarvin, the man we're discussing on the lunch date, Matt, how would you describe him and kind of what he represents?
Oh man, that's a good one. He is I'd say he's probably one of the most influential minds of our generation. And I say that as a valueless observation. Just objectively speaking, ultimately he's going to have a massive influence on I think the direction of the culture. And most people are never going to know who he was, because he's the type of person who influences the influencers. His stuff is kind of difficult to access. You know, if you aren't already of the mind of someone who wants to read political philosophy, then you know you're probably gonna. He's very, very wordy. He likes to. Yeah. To me, I enjoy the wordiness, because to me it's like an art form. It's like he's performing with his prose, and so I really enjoy it. But I know a lot of people don't. So that kind of creates a natural. Sort of like a natural hurdle or a natural barrier to entry, which creates a natural filtering effect on your audience. So you only get the types of people that you're looking for.
Matt, let me interrupt you. You just, in my opinion, described yourself and your show.
That's exactly what I was just about to say. I was just about to say that we've sort of done the same thing with our show.
Okay, keep going.
Yeah. By number one, the whole, like, you have to go to YouTube. You have to go to YouTube and you have to be willing to sit down and listen to a 2 or 2.5 hour like dialogue / rant session between two guys that, like, we're talking about.
There's going to be an intro. There's going to be an intro before it even gets started. You got to make it through that.
Right. We sit and we bullshit for 10 to 30 minutes before we even actually get into the actual conversation. And a lot of this has been, I wouldn't say it's been conscious. It's been conscious. It hasn't been deliberate. It's been more that this is just kind of how we started doing it. And then we realized the benefit of it, that this is a great way to kind of winnow out our audience and get just the right people, just the people who really value what we're talking about. Because that's ultimately, once you realize democracy is bullshit, then you realize that you don't need to appeal to everyone. This is a principle of marketing. I learned this from working with Jason, that if you try to appeal to everyone, you get watered down and milquetoast and uninteresting. You have to be making enemies. If you aren't making enemies, it means that your message sucks. You have to be making enemies, because if you're making enemies, that means you're making friends too. For every person that you get ranting and howling and hollering at you for how much you piss them off, you've got that person and probably more who actually really love what you're doing. So I've said from the very beginning, since we started doing the show, I said that I don't care about Steven. My goal is that I want to create an echo chamber. I just want to have people who already agree with us, or people who are already going on the journey that we're going, and they want an outlet of like people who are saying what they're already thinking. This is a principle of marketing that Jason talked about. He says that you have to enter the conversation people are already having in their heads. Yeah. If you're out just trying to, this applies to the libertarian, to the LP idea, that if you're just gonna go out and just try to just appeal to people, you're just gonna like try to have popular appeal. you're not going to be successful. You have to start with a specific targeted group of people who have a specific grievance, and you want to connect with them and you want to emphasize to them, I share your pain. I know how you feel. I was there once. I know what it's like. And here's the solution that I found. This is like a basic principle of marketing. And people might say, oh, well, politics and sales are different. No, they're not. Everything is sales. Everything that you're doing is always sales. I'm sitting here on this podcast talking to you guys because I'm trying to sell my worldview. I'm trying to sell the way that I see the world. I'm trying to sell my beliefs to other people. And I'm looking for people who are willing to buy it. If you disagree with me, fine. Okay, I don't care. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the people who do agree with me. And I think that this is I don't really know how we got to there from Moldbug, but I guess that's what it was. It was that he has kind of a barrier to entry to get into what he's talking about. But once you get into it, his insight into the workings of power, the machinations of power, and how on a meta, like sociological level, how ideas morph and form, and then also history too. He's read more than anybody I've ever heard. And he's actually gone back and read a lot of the original source documents from past times, and not just the approved stuff. Because once you understand how power works, you realize the winners write the history books. Well, the losers didn't not exist. The losers were out there. Why did they lose? What were they bringing to the table? And what happened when their ideas clashed with the ideas of the winners, and why did they lose? When you start going down that path, I think that it's very informative, and it'll also tell you why. It gives you the tools to evaluate ideas today in the current climate, and to be able to predict which ideas are going to be successful and which aren't, and why the ones that will be successful, because there's a pattern to how ideas have evolved and morphed and adapted in the past.
And I would say if you're looking to expose somebody to Curtis Yarvin, and especially if they're kind of like a right-leaning person, I know Buck made this observation, but on this podcast with Tho, but his recent appearance on Tucker, like not free Tucker, on pay Tucker, but you can find it for free, even though you should not do that, but you can. And if you share that with a right-wingish person, I think in that one he is pretty dialed in. Like, he does talk a lot, but he kind of does go from A to B to C. I do believe in that interview he says he's going to get back to Afghanistan at some point, and I don't think he ever does. Yeah, I wanted to make a meme about it, but I did. But yeah, I think for most like right-leaning people, that would be a really good one to expose them to, and it might help them connect some missing dots in their own political philosophy.
It was the most concise I've ever heard him, and it's funny because it's compared to a normal person, he's still goes on a lot and he's very wordy, like we said, but it's like, for my audience that's familiar with Scott Horton, there's some similarities there. Once you get Scott on a topic, those of us who have interviewed him know that rather than 20 questions for an hour, it's like 3. Mm-hmm. And I think that might have been the case with Tucker, with Curtis Yarvin, maybe 4, 5, 6 questions, and it was over an hour. But having said that, I actually do think he was quite concise, and even as someone who's heard him many times now, I followed him better during that interview than I have on the other appearances I've seen. But I highly recommend it to my audience who's curious about it. It's on the Fox Nation app, but again, I think it's out there for free if you just kind of look around, search Tucker Carlson Today and Curtis Yarvin. I still think Tucker Carlson should have called that show Tucker Carlson Untucked, because he didn't have his tie on and everything, but whatever.
That would be great.
Yeah.
And you get to see you get to basically see an approximation of my lunch with him. If you look at Tucker's face throughout the entire interview, he's just.
At one point, Curtis Yarvin goes, "Wait, what's the matter? You're giving me that that however you call
Carlson.
it.
Yeah,
The
your famous Tucker face.
The
Does that
famous
mean
Tucker face.
I play that for my mother. She lost her shit. I've never seen her laugh so hard. Yeah, I've never heard somebody call out Tucker face to Tucker's face.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, if that's not worth a monthly subscription to Fox Nation, I don't know what is.
I actually had a subscription to it already because at some point Judge Andrew Napolitano had a show on there, and then I guess he didn't, and then I forgot I had a subscription to it. But the Tucker show's decent on there. Some of them are definitely worth watching, and that one certainly is. Let me tell you guys about your one-stop shop for all things CBD related, and that would be PalomaVerdeCBD.com. That is PalomaVerdeCBD.com, where naturally they are a sponsor of this show. So there's a promo code, which is BUCK, B-U-C-K. If you use that over at PalomaVerdeCBD.com, you will get 25% off of your order. Everything over $75, that is. So that's the stuff I got to tell you up top. Now, I want to tell you, other than supporting this show, which I'm assuming you'd like to do, I'll tell you some other reasons why you should shop there. For one, they opened a brick and mortar store right before the government lockdowns happened, which basically wiped that part out. So they're online only now. So you got to feel for anyone that was a victim of government overreach, like the lockdowns, and that's what these guys were. But they're a really wonderful couple. They're very good people, very like-minded into this kind of same stuff, the weird stuff that we're all into. I can tell you that Carlos and Vanessa out of San Antonio are truly good people, and they're really hard workers. They put a lot into this business. There's a lot of personal touches, so that ought to entice you guys as well. I can tell you about some of the products. They've got the mint CBD tinctures. They've got all the CBD stuff. If you're thinking, do they have this? Yeah, they probably do. They've got CBD soft gels, CBD gummies. They've got the tinctures. Like I said, they've got salve stick. There's a sleep bundle to help you sleep with several things in that. They've got salve, and I bragged about this a lot, but I genuinely mean it. The CBD Cool Menthol Sports Cream is the best sports cream I've ever used. And I am not saying that just because they're sponsors. I actually mean it. Also, the pet treats, the dog chews. Guess who loves the dog chews? That would be Lux, my French bulldog. If you know anything about the French bulldog breed, once they're about 10 years old, they kind of limp around a little bit slower than they used to. Well, that was my dog, basically, up until I started giving him these dog chews and putting the pet CBD tinctures on his food every morning. And now he thinks he's like 2 years old again, which would be 14 years old, I guess, in dog years. But yeah, so he thinks he's a teenager. Anyway, I love that he loves that. And I love that these guys are sponsors. Like I said, they're great people. They want to help support this show, as do you. So, PalomaVerdeCBD.com, promo code BUCK, B-U-C-K at checkout, get you 25% off of everything over $75. Please give them a visit. It helps them, it helps me, and it helps my dog. What more could you ask for? Let's get back to the show. Matt, I got to ask, well, I'll ask you both. Matt first, there's been certainly, and I've gotten some of this from you as well, a direction toward Orthodox Christianity. And the Lord of Spirits podcast is mentioned many times on your show. And I think that's a lot of people, including myself, have started listening to that podcast because of hearing about it on your show. Talk about what influence that's having on you and kind of the direction you're headed in that regard.
As you were asking me the question, I was sitting here trying to remember what really got me down that angle in the first place. Maybe it'll come to me as I kind of talk through this.
Is it Vin?
There was something. Vin played a role. Definitely, he played a significant role. But I remember when I started hearing him talk about orthodoxy, it was like it connected with something else that I was thinking about, and I was like, okay, I'll give it more. There was something else that really started it, and Vin was kind of like confirming it for me. I was raised in a very conservative Christian household, and but it's ironic that it was very conservative, like culturally, because denominationally it was not so much, because I was Seventh-day Adventist, which is a denomination, a Protestant denomination that's only been around since the 1840s. It kind of came up right at that same time as Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses and Christian Science, and there was a bunch of different sort of like extreme offshoots of Protestantism that all arose right about the same time. And so I grew up very much involved in a deeply devout Christian religious community. Went to a denominational high school, denominational college. I did all of that. I went to an evangelistic school where I was going door to door and giving Bible studies and inviting people to evangelistic series, all that kind of thing. So I grew up within that culture, and then I kind of started drifting from it, and it's been a source of a lot of I guess kind of consternation for me that I kind of have this perpetual sense in the back of my mind that, I'm apostatizing. I'm one of the people that I grew up hearing all these evil things about. And I mean, not to like unfairly characterize my growing up years. It wasn't that bad, but it's just like I'm the one who's now, what's the status of my soul? But I just I wasn't connecting with everything that I grew up with. It didn't port to the real world. There was a bunch of things that I remember the one thing that really set me off with it was I was throughout my early 20s, I had a group of friends through going to Seahawks and Mariners games a lot where we would go out and go drinking. And my family just didn't like it. I ended up, I lived with my back with my parents for about a year right after college while I was trying to figure out where I was going to go. And my dad sat me down one day and he said, I saw on your social media I saw you out posting pictures of the beers and stuff you're drinking, and we'd ask you that while you're living under our roof that you not go out and drink. And once you leave, then do whatever you want, but while you're under our roof, please don't do that. And which was fine. It was a reasonable request. What stuck with me though was that my whole family drinks caffeine like crazy, and I was like, so what's the difference? And either way, we're talking about something that changes your consciousness. Like when you get down at the like atomic level, you're just talking about this atom with that atom. And there's something about that just doesn't, there's something that just isn't right. That doesn't seem consistent about this. And that just kind of ate at me. And I sat, just kind of put it into the back of my mind and just kind of let the back of my mind stew over it for several years. And as I've been talking here, I've been trying to see if it'll come back, and it's not. I don't remember what it was that really got me into orthodoxy to begin with, but ultimately I went through a stage for the last few years where I was dabbling in some psychedelics, and I was listening to Terence McKenna and kind of going that route. And that was very the mystical world was really pulling at me. It was really connecting with me. And I remember what it was. So while this is happening, while this whole like mystical thing is really starting to come to me, I mean, I've like grown my hair out. I wear a lot of Hawaiian shirts. I have a very kind of like a hippie vibe that I've deliberately cultivated, and that sort of thing just appeals to me. I like the patterns and the colors, and like right now, if I could show you the backdrop on my monitor here, it's a Mandelbrot set, which is a mathematical, it's a fractal mathematical thing. I don't even know what to call it. It's some nerd shit. But it's really, really bright colors and ornate. It kind of looks like paisley from a distance. That sort of thing just sort of tickles my brain. And so I was really attached to this whole mysticism thing, but I kept feeling drawn back to Christianity. And I feel like I've never doubted the fundamental truth of the gospel. I've never doubted the existence of God. It's been like the nature of him that I've had issues with. The picture of God that was being delivered to me there was something that wasn't coherent or consistent about it. So then as I was reasoning back through political theory, and I was starting to question the premise of individualism, and I was recognizing this parallel track that was happening in politics and like political culture and in religion, where you have with the Christian church, it started with like a single Christian church and then gradually decentralized from there. You get all these different denominations that are all splitting off. And then at the same time, within politics, you had a monarchy, you had kings, and then it's decentralized down from there and you're continuing this decentralizing process through various adaptations of technology and both of these decentralizing things were happening at the same time. And I was realizing that politics and religion are basically the same thing. It's like the same software just being expressed through two different avenues. And as I was being king-pilled, as I was being sold on the superiority of monarchy to democracy, and in fact, like the inevitability of monarchy and the fact that it's baked into us. I was like, there's religious implications to this, like the King of Kings. If he's the King of Kings, that implies the existence of other kings. And then throughout the Bible, I consider myself an ANCAP, but I'm looking at the Bible and I'm like, in every single case I can find, Christians are being called to submit to authority. Whether or not that authority is legitimate, Christians are called to submit to it. And these two things are just, it's like, I can't treat these as separate phenomena. They have to be connected. There has to be something to this. There's something in the foundation that connects these two ideas. And so from there, I just started going, okay, well, how far back into Christianity can I go? If this process was happening then, this decentralization process, where like today, this idea of with Protestantism, like the fundamental idea with it really is like a relationship with God is an individual thing, me to God. I can open the Bible, I can read it myself. The Holy Spirit will as I connect with the Holy Spirit through what I'm reading, he can reveal the nature of God through the words. I don't need to be associated with any sort of institution, or I don't need to have any intermediaries or anything like that. It's a strictly an individual thing. I was like, well, this is anarchy. This is anarchy that like, say the Constitution is something. We don't need to have a state with a constitution. I can have my own constitution. I can be my own state unto myself. I can be my own authority unto myself. I don't need to be connected to a larger community of people. I don't need to be connected to something larger than myself. I'm the fundamental unit. This is a parallel that happened in politics and religion. So I was like, well, if I recognize the illegitimacy of that position from the political perspective, then I have to confront it on the religious side too, because it seems like they're inextricable. So that was what led me down. So then when I started listening to Van Armani, and he's talking about the mystical and the material, and he's talking about orthodoxy, and I did a little bit of searching on it, and basically people said, oh, it's like mystical Christianity, kind of, which is not completely accurate, but the Orthodox Church is much more comfortable with the mystical than any other Christian denomination or any other expression of Christianity. So I guess it's kind of a long story, but that was sort of the thinking or the experience that led me to looking for Orthodox podcasts and found Lord of Spirits. And that just, I mean, I've been a huge fan of Graham Hancock for a long time. So I love the idea of like alternate history and any sort of conspiracies or any sort of like stuff with giants and all that kind of stuff. I already would go crazy about that sort of thing. So to find that actually happening in the Bible, like there's this untold history of what was happening in the Bible that we've lost in the modern world because we don't have these traditions and rituals that have retained that meaning, even through translations and cultural adaptations. They've retained that meaning. And so they still have those stories. They have the stories of the giants, of, of like demon sex that's happening in the Old Testament, and all this stuff that it gives you a whole new understanding of what's happening through all of these biblical stories. And then when you take that and then you apply that understanding of history to the current political climate, and you recognize, well, what are these conspiracies of like that there's pedophilia and that people are drinking human blood and there's demon possession in the elites and all this kind of thing. That's what's being described in the Old Testament with the giants and all of that. Seeing those things parallel, it's like once those things started clicking and connecting for me, I was like, there's all this, like, it has to be true. Like these things have to be true. I have to be on the track pursuing truth, which is ultimately where I want to be.
Well put. Steven, has this seeped into your worldview? Are you what are your thoughts on this kind of stuff as well?
I have exactly the same story as Matthew, believe it or not. Word for word. It's exactly the same.
Just like ditto.
No.
Seventh-day Adventist. Yeah.
Yeah. I have, unlike this heathen, I actually went to Orthodox churches growing up. But I was baptized Catholic, and I've always kind of I've been going through like a perpetual like crisis of faith, my entire life. And I think I've had many people tell me, "Oh, you're a called person," and living in the South, I was exposed to a lot of like Protestant churches, which I never really thought was like a big difference, but something would just kind of never stick. And then I think it was conversations with Vin, and he referred me to a really interesting guy who I would consider my spiritual father, that I really need to talk to. That I would love to have him on the show also. But in talking with him, kind of what was appealing to me was, I went through my entire life kind of wondering if I was like smart or like dumber than a bag of hammers, and I could never really figure it out. And like I kind of just realized, I'm just kind of intuitive. I've got like, whatever my IQ is, like I just kind of feel things. I'm in tune with something. I don't know how. I can't even sort of explain it, but the mysticism was helpful in that regard. And so when I was talking to this guy, he was talking about kind of uniting that portion of me, sort of the intuitive and mystical side, with the, I guess the product of sort of like, existing in this current time frame that we exist in, where we are children of the Enlightenment, whether our brains function as such, and so that part is, is as much as I like bash it, it's definitely a part of me, trying to just have every proof for everything, like I went to engineering school, and there's just so much math and whatever else in me that I find the need to try to like prove things, but like in a way that isn't necessarily always useful, and kind of combining those two things was very appealing. And there's a concept in Orthodox Christianity that's really interesting, which is both and. So, where everyone's always trying to look for like a one definitive solution, for something. Often, if you open yourself to the possibility of both and, that tends to work a lot of times. And then a lot of people who kind of like snivel at that kind of thinking start to look very silly.
Yeah, well put. Let's we've been hitting an hour at this point. All right, Matt, for those of us, I'm not included in this. For those of my listeners who are not familiar with Kingpilled, summarize what it's about, and if you want to give a pitch to them, just whatever you'd like to say about it. If they've not heard you guys on the podcast, soon to be podcast or videocast yet, tell them about it.
I've got to go right to my pinned tweet, because one of our most loyal supporters posted this as a comment of several months ago on one of the episodes, and this is exactly the sort of message that we're hoping that people would take away. Shout out Clockwork Industries. Yes. Jim says, unless you have the power to take over the system, which none of us do, you gain power through individual responsibility, building wealth, power, and influence, preferably in a method you enjoy. Then help others to do the same thing. Start with your family, then friends. Build communities to prop each other up to weather the coming storm. Build autonomy, practice agorism when applicable, learn self-sufficiency and practical skills, prepare for the worst, hope for the best. And this is the sentence. You have to build security inside the system so that when it falls, you can remain and rise from it. Ultimately, the libertarian world starts with rights. It says, I am an individual, and because I'm an individual, I have these rights, and the world owes me respect for my rights. And if they're not giving it to me, then I'm going to start campaigning for my rights. And then what ultimately happens is that, well, that seems kind of selfish. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for other people who are also having their rights violated like me, and I'm going to pretend that my campaign is actually for those people. But ultimately, fundamentally, it's a self-serving thing, and there's nothing wrong with that. We're all self-serving. This is it's like the Randian premise that selfishness is good. Actually, it's actually good for you to put on your oxygen mask before you put it onto other people. That sort of self-centeredness is actually a good thing. The problem is when you start with rights and you say the world owes this to me, you are already off on the wrong foot. Ultimately, the whole model of the atomized individual who is born into the world, and we just are rational people who can just we can just derive the truth for ourselves and then apply it and all that sort of thing. That whole model is just broken. When you're born, you aren't born as a blank slate atomized person. Before you're even aware of yourself, you have already been imprinted upon by the world around you. And you're not born as an individual. You're born as a son or a daughter or a sister or a brother, or in weird cases, maybe a grandfather or grandmother or an aunt or an uncle. You're born into a network of relationships. And those relationships bring with them obligations. And the story of human rights, quote unquote, is actually, this is a better model. It is, if you begin by embracing your responsibilities, by embracing the responsibilities of first those people who are closest to you, and then working outwardly from that, like the Jordan Peterson principle of clean your room. You have to clean your own room before you can try to clean up society. If you begin with that premise, then what you have is the right to be rewarded for embracing your responsibilities. But it starts with you. You have to begin by embracing your responsibilities, by securing your own liberty, securing the liberty of your community. If you can do that, you'll be given more responsibility. And to him, much is given, much is required. But the man or woman who can embrace the most responsibility will become the man or woman who's given the most power. Power and responsibility are ultimately, they go hand in hand. So if you want freedom, if you want liberty, if you want your human rights to be respected and protected by your society, you have to start by bearing your own responsibilities. If you have responsibilities that have gone unborn, that you haven't bared them, you haven't picked up your cross daily, if you aren't doing that work on yourself, you have no right to demand that society give you anything. You start by giving to society. And the magic of, the code of reality is that when you begin giving, when you start from this premise of, I'm going to give, I'm going to provide value into the world, eventually you'll begin to receive value back. This is the law of attraction. There's a reason that the law of attraction is so powerful, because it's actually getting at something about the nature of reality. As a Christian would say, that it's because this is the nature of God is love, and love being something that is self-sacrificial and places others ahead of them. So ultimately, libertarianism's emphasis on the self and the individual, it's very self-centered, and that's what ends up making it so self-defeating in reality. So the message of the Kingpilled is to treat yourself as a king of your own domain. The king isn't the guy who can do whatever he wants. The king is the guy upon whom everybody else depends. Everyone's depending upon the king to be the baseline of the society, to be the rock everybody else can lean against, can rest upon. If you start from that premise, if you treat yourself as the king of your own reality, then you'll be able to attain anything that you want, and ultimately you'll have the power or the authority or the ability to actually impact the world in a positive way, like most libertarians want to.
Well put. Steven, you want to say anything on the way out of here?
Yeah, man, totally disagree. I never signed a social contract, so.
You at least tell them where they can follow you.
Okay, definitely don't follow me on Twitter. Definitely don't follow me on Twitter. It's Messina Inc., but don't even think about following it. But my cheap plug is that I've been starting doing a lot more video editing work for other people. I usually just do it for myself. And if there's anyone out there who has a podcast and needs it edited or anything else, if you want to email me at stevenmessinaphotography@gmail.com, I can help you out.
I will link to that in the show notes page for this. And look how good his camera looks and everything in this.
Don't go by today. I'll show you other shit.
Matt, where can they follow you? Plug away.
I'm on Twitter at Real Kingpilled, and you're welcome to follow me there. If you cross enough lines, then I'll just block you. I have no problem blocking people. It's actually made my life a lot better since I started. Sometimes I'll tweet stuff just deliberately to get a rise out of specific people. It's like bait for the people who I want to block, to make sure that they they don't get away without me blocking them. But yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Kingpilled. And then if you want to join the Nomad Network that I mentioned earlier today, the place to go for that is my.nomadnetwork.app. And there's a free level you can join. You can join the community there. I'll say this though, it's a very positive community. It's very uplifting, and everyone is there interested in seeing what value they can provide and how they can support and uplift the people around them. So if you're going to join the network, then don't be someone who's going to bring negativity and a bad attitude or anything like that. It's a very positive, uplifting place. And we're picky about the types of people that we want there. So if that's something that appeals to you, then my.nomadnetwork.app. And then lastly, for the show, for Kingpilled, Steven and I set up a subscribe star. So we have a supporting listeners group. If you want to come join us, join our private Discord server, then you can go to subscribestar.com/Kingpilled.
I will link to that as well. And at some point, very, very soon, maybe when this drops, we can find Kingpilled on the podcast app of your choice. I hope.
It should be there.
All right. Excellent. Matt Erickson, Steven Messina, thank you guys for being here on the show.
Thanks, buddy.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. All right. I hope you guys enjoyed that good chat with Matt Erickson and Steven Messina. I love chatting with those guys, and they're in the Praxian group that we have with a bunch of other people, good people that you guys know as well. And it's always fun to bounce ideas off these guys. Good people to know. So I've got some housekeeping, but it's actually some big announcements here. I told you guys last week on the show with Tho Bishop, at the end, I mentioned this trip I'm taking to Mexico, put on by Johnny Profita from the Peddling Fiction podcast. I told you I would give you all the details. Here it is. It is the Sayulita Super Spreader. How about that? December 10th through December 12th. And that is in Mexico, of course, Sayulita, Mexico. I will read the description and give it to you like this. Join Peddling Fiction's Johnny Profita and special guests Michael Rechtenwald, Martha Bueno, Liberty Lockdown's Clint Russell, Counterflow's Buck Johnson, and COVID Jesus, a.k.a. the King of the Cocks, Robbie the Fire Bernstein, for a week of libertarian fun in the sun. The event takes place in Sayulita, a small surf town about 45 minutes north of Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, where, for all intents and purposes, COVID ceases to exist. Multiple live podcasts, talks, stand-up comedy, and countless shenanigans will take place, all with audience participation. I will put a link to the place to get the tickets for this. There's VIP tickets and regular tickets in the show notes page for this episode, and I'll do it in every episode leading up to the event. It sounds like it's going to be quite good, and I love me some tequila and margaritas. Let's hang out there on the beach in Mexico peacefully. No COVID craziness at all. How nice would that be? Also, you guys know I've got the Renegade University weekend coming up here in Lockhart on my property. Just quickly, the details for those if there's any new listeners that weren't aware of this. Renegade University weekend, Texas, October 8th through 10th, 2021. Join Thaddeus Russell and Buck Johnson for a weekend retreat in the barbecue capital of Texas. That would be Lockhart. The event will be held at my property, walking distance from 3 world-famous barbecue joints, Black's, Smitty's, and Kreutz, just 30 minutes from Austin. We will have, joining us, of course, Thad and myself, Jack the Perfume Nationalist, love this guy, Scott Horton, Hotep Jesus, Deirdre McCluskey, and Cody Wilson. It's going to be quite fun. The VIP tickets are sold out. There are, I believe, still some regular weekend package tickets. And like we mentioned last week, also my friend Tho Bishop will be in attendance. We will try to be doing some type of interview or podcasting type thing with Tho as well. I got to figure out the details on that. So join us here in Lockhart. It's going to be quite fun. And since Robbie the Fire Bernstein and Kyle Ruff are friends of mine, they will also be here in Lockhart. There's an after party that Saturday. I believe it's October 9th. After the event here on my property, after we're done with the podcasting and interviewing and all that stuff with the special guests, Robbie the Fire Bernstein and Kyle Ruff will be doing comedy sets at a bar on the square here in downtown Lockhart called Load Off Fannies. So I will also put a link to that event and how you can get tickets. All of this stuff coming up, man, it's a lot to juggle, but it's all going to be quite fun. And I will still keep pumping out episodes of this show every week. So subscribe on YouTube, damn it. Do that. Subscribe on YouTube. Watch the show there. We've got this show, of course, will be broadcast on YouTube as well. And leave me a nice review, and I will read the reviews on the air. In fact, let me read you one right now. This one is from Mysteriously. What a mysterious name. Important voice in the libertarian podcasting world. I found Buck's podcast over a year ago, but it really became a must-listen pod during COVID and the election season. I'm so tired of most libertarian-minded podcasts that proclaim that there is no difference between the left and the right. Buck sees that the danger for our country is coming from the progressive movement on the left, and he does not shy away from tough topics. Very nice to have that review. Thank you very much, and I'm glad you sensed everything that you sensed. Very well done. You guys, so you obviously, you know the website, counterflowpodcast.com. It's got all my links. It's got the t-shirts on there. We will be selling t-shirts at the RU event. Maybe I'll be selling them at the Mexico event if I still have any. And follow me on Twitter, @BuckRebel, BuckRebel. And until next week, have a good one. See you soon.
You get split in fucking half, but I call him the hologram brass. But I am the center inside the placenta of math. You clash with cyanide gas and die fast. Rhythmical equivalent of solids, liquid and gas. We smash your sinus with the power of Lord Titus. But I am the virus inside of the iris of Cyrus.
Like the sound of the Counterflow podcast? Our audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.
This has been the Counterflow Podcast, a part of the Renegade Media Network.